Welcome back to Savage Fabrication Insta-Spool Performance, our YouTube channel on understanding all kinds of cool mechanical things. We're back on the dyno today. I gotta get this stuff done because on Saturday there's a newer Ford coming, so I wanted to get this out of the way so we take the truck off and change turbos over a different area. So we're on it today. Today we have a 100% stock turbocharger off of a 96 to 02, I should say 96 to 98, but relatively close. It's going to be a 55mm compressor wheel, 60mm X-deuce from the turbine wheel, and a 12cm housing. All factory. The only thing that's been changed is all the boost reference to the wastegate is unhooked, so we're running on the gate spring only inside the actuator, so drive pressure will run up. We did a fairly close to stock turbo test recently that did 348 or 346, so we're looking to be hopefully maybe just shy of that, or we're in that same area. We ran a larger turbocharger and did 392, so we fully know that the truck is capable of more, but we need to get a baseline so we're not just comparing stuff at random. So we're going to run a 100% stock turbocharger for 2 to 3 runs and see what it does. So from here, when we do changes with different turbochargers, we can go back and look at this baseline on the stock one and get a good idea of how different ones compare. We're going to do a no brake boost run, and then we'll do a brake boost run, and then if I think we can get more out of it than those 2 runs, we'll do one more. But the non-brake boost at probably going to be at 1500, 1600 RPMs. That's where we can just run every turbo non-brake boosted from that set point, as well as we'll probably do like a 10 PSI launch at a RPM, 1800, 2000 RPM. So we know the RPM for both of those, and we know the PSI. We're leaving out for the one, so when we do make comparisons, they are equal. Next step, we're going to get down fired up and get our runs made. So now that we're back here on the board with we did 3 runs, 1 no stage run, 1 stage run, and 1 run with the attitude adjuster set at about between 60 and 70% rack travel available. So we can see on the reason we did this no stage run is it will really show when we change turbochargers or timing and other things like that. It's going to be very apparent with there being nothing assisting spool up other than going wide open throttle at 1500 RPMs. Everything's going to be dependent on the tune-up and the turbocharger. So when we do a change one at a time, we can very easily see where it was better and where it was worse. The next thing is I'll do the green run. This was a 10 PSI stage and then let it go. When we did that, we netted, so the blue run was 309.61 wheel horsepower at 2450 and 665.7 foot-pounds at the same about 2350. With the staged run, we got up to peak boost faster. We did pick up power and torque. We did 328.45 wheel horsepower, about 2500 RPMs, and 711.77 foot-pounds at about 2300. We can see it start to fall. We can see though on both the non-staged and the stage run with the pump basically on unlock, we see that peak torque occurs in the same place. So you can see that the turbine side is going into choke flow regardless of the torque number at the same RPM. So when we go ahead and take fuel away with the red run, that's when we turn the CCs down, the maximum CCs available. We can see that we hit the max CCs earlier. We actually hit the max CCs right about 2300 is where it peaked, and it just stayed flat because it just kept eating the same amount. As long as the horsepower number is below what we previously did, it's just going to hold a flat line until it was to hit about right here on the green, and then it's going to follow the green down if we ran it out past 3000. But running a turbo that small past 3000 is not the best idea. But we can see where we ran out of torque, or ran out of fuel, more fuel to continue to inject about 2200 RPMs, versus with the rack able to travel further, we actually, instead of running out of fuel to inject, we would run into turbine choke condition at the higher engine speed. But it's really good baseline data. This isn't meant to impress or anything like that. Secondly, it's not that impressive. But it is baseline stuff. This is on a 160 pump 5x9 injectors. That's what the injectors are, that have about 300,000 miles on them. The injector's a maximum balanced 180. So we're going to get it off the roller and go ahead and put on the next turbocharger test. I think we have some Borg-Warner stuff that I'm going to see about getting the fit on there. So that'll be the next thing that we work on. So these are our main baselines, are the blue run and the green run. The red one was to play with the attitude adjuster and to see what would happen if we pulled fuel out of it as far as maximum fuel goes. Alright, we're back at the board. We have our sheet printed up. I want to go over the first parts of these dyno runs. There's actually 6 total. We have them all underneath here. What had happened was I put between the 54 14 centimeter and the 55 12 centimeter, I purchased a used attitude adjuster, and while putting the attitude adjuster on, I had to loosen the fuel filter housing bolts. By doing so, I forgot to tighten them. So my initial 3 runs that we will put in the video had a massive boost leak. We're going to actually use it to show you guys what a paper gasket boost leak sounds like. Or if it's a drive pressure leak, they essentially sound the same, whether it's vibrating the paper gasket or vibrating the metal gaskets on the exhaust side. It sounds basically the same. It's extremely audible. And if you do hear that, you know you have a boost leak. I was just thinking that maybe it was the AFC tuner regulator or needle valve making sounds, but I was wrong. So after doing so, came back and did 3 more runs. 2 things happened. So I put the attitude adjuster on, as well as put VP Racing Cetanium in the tank. I don't know how much of a change that did. Mainly threw it in there to play with lubricity and stuff like that to make sure I don't hurt this new pump. Also added a bunch of return springs just to make sure it doesn't hang. So it's not really good comparison to compare the 14 centimeter to the 12 centimeter. The fuel base chemistry has been changed, as well as the attitude adjuster. To show the difference in what a boost leak can do, and this boost leak only occurred at 20 pounds of boost. So like this small difference underneath here, basically this is below 20 pounds. And we can see once you hit 20 pounds, the green is boost leak fixed, the blue is boost leak not fixed. Again, blue is with a boost leak, and red is without the boost leak. This little anomaly is just a day-to-day anomaly. I would not attribute this to much of anything, but we can see the torque difference here between having a boost leak and not having a boost leak. So at about 2150, 800 foot-pounds versus about 660 foot-pounds. This was the roll-on. So not much of a change with the roll-on just because of how long it took to even get in the boost. We're starting to get really close to where the turbo wants to lay over by the time it really starts making any kind of steam. And it doesn't look that far apart because they're similar, but no boost leak, 337.36 at 2500, and with a boost leak, 309 at 2500. So this is all 3 runs without the boost leak. So the green is a roll-on, the blue is a max effort staged run that starts at 10 pounds of boost, and the red is turning, limiting rack travel to 55% of max. One thing to go over, I put it in the notes of the 14 centimeter, but it wasn't verbally said, is that while doing the attitude adjuster, I went in and checked the AFC. So I did is I air checked the AFC to see how much boost pressure I needed to get the rack to move a certain distance. So come to find out, it takes 40 pounds boost to get 100% rack travel available. So only getting to 30 and 33 pounds of boost on both the 54 millimeter 14 centimeter and 55 millimeter 12 centimeter is not netting max rack travel. 30 pounds of boost is 80% available fuel. That being said, I don't think a 5x9 injector is going to go too much farther with this particular setup. We did do 392 with the 5x9. I don't know if we would see more than that on such a small housing that goes into peak torque at about 2100 RPMs. Here's 2100. 1, 2, 3, 4. So about 2150 is where it's hitting peak torque at. We need more RPMs available than that to get the engine CFM up to a higher amount to then multiply it with the turbocharger. So you can see though that on the stock turbocharger for a baseline, we're going to keep the same fuel in the tank, and we'll keep refueling it the same way that we have been, just to keep everything equal. Everything's recorded, so we start all the runs at the same time, doing comparison tests, but pretty pumped on a 5x9 injector, a 160 horsepower pump, stock injector that has right around 300,000 miles on it. This thing threw down 800 foot-pounds at 2150. That is an awesome number on an inertia dyno. I don't think I have tested anything to date that has a spread at 2100 of 352,801. That is an amazing spread. If we were to drive this thing on the street, it's not registered for street use, it would be an absolute monster. We can see peak torque falling quite rapidly though after this. So what we're seeing is right here is where peak volumetric efficiency is occurring, and every rip'em past this, volumetric efficiency is falling. The best way to think about volumetric efficiency is that the motor's displacement is getting smaller. So 359 cubic inches, 300, I didn't do the math on this part of it, but 340, 330, 300. The motor is getting smaller, so it's consuming less of the cold side charge air the higher we rev it past this point. Peak torque is going to always be in the same location, and I want to state that we're talking about maximum peak torque. So a particular turbocharger is going to have a max peak torque value that's either set by the turbine side or the compressor side. It is almost always, in most cases, set with the turbine side on most turbochargers. So the reason why this one can be earlier is because we actually hit peak fueling right here. It's going to follow the same way, because once we get past this point, we're going to be losing VE at the same rate. Why this one can be over here is we had the same amount of fuel as the blue one on the green one, but we didn't quite get to the boost level yet. So working anywhere underneath this blue curve, which could go this direction as well, peak torque can be located. But we won't have peak torque be higher and further to the right, and also it typically won't be higher and further to the left. So we can work anywhere underneath this curve. Now if we loaded it higher, usually what we would see is we would see it come up, it'll hit this same margin and just have a softer layover until this point, and then it would follow this same one going down. Typically we won't see it do more torque unless we artificially loaded it harder. You can see over here on the 14 centimeter, it's not as steep of a torque curve coming up, but it's also not as steep coming back down the other way. It's close. I mean, we're going 12 centimeter to 14 centimeter, not a huge change. But we can see that the torque peak is a little softer than this one. So we can see how we go into the choke flow. It's a little bit of a more rounded hump going in the choke flow on the turbine side, where this is a more peaky hump going into choke flow on the turbine side. Kind of think of this as your normally aspirated heads and cams. So if we wanted to move this somewhere, we need to change the flow rate on the turbine wheel itself. So if we wanted the same torque or more torque and shift it to the left, we're going to have to go to a faster spooling setup that's going to choke earlier. So it's going to run not as good at high RPMs, but it's going to come up on boost even faster down here. And if we wanted to operate the engine up, you know, closer to 3,000 RPMs, then we're going to have to increase the flow rate on the turbine side. Now, this is on a 55 millimeter compressor wheel. Kind of backwards work the math. 352. All right, so excuse my terrible handwriting, but I'm not a English major, but we do hot rods and turbos. So 359 cubic inches at 2,500 RPMs at 88% VE. Might be a little bit on the high side, probably not though. What we're seeing right here, we might drop it down to 80, usually 84% to 80% at peak horsepower, 88, 92 at peak torque. But 88% VEs, 228.5 CFM. We have 33 PSI gauge, 33 plus 14.7, which is atmospheric. And then we divide that number by atmospheric, 14.7, for a 3.24 pressure ratio. Oh, I know where I was at. 3.24 times 0.74 for compressor efficiency. Mind you, I did not go look at a map, nor does the map apply strictly to our conditions on this day. It was 34% humidity and 88.28 degrees outside. 90 degrees, 87 degrees, 82 degrees, all with extremely high humidity for our area. So coming out to 2.4. So we go to 3.24 pressure ratio times 0.74 for compressor efficiency gives us a 2.4 density ratio. Now if we were doing this without a dyno, we take 2.4 times 1.45 equals a 3.48 density ratio. 3.48 times our CFM, 228.5. 795.5 CFM, correct it to SAE, times 0.07, gives us 55.6 pounds hour consumed through the compressor. Multiply by that by 8, and that's our theoretical horsepower number is 445.5 wheel horsepower. Now, we got a dyno graph right here. It says we didn't make 445.5 wheel horsepower. So then what we got to do is we got to go back. So we know that we did 352. So we'll take 352 divided by 8, 44 pounds minute. 44 divided by 0.07 is 628.57 CFM. So we take 628.57 and divide it by 228.5. That gives us a 2.7 density ratio. So now we have an idea of what the density ratio was at 2,500 RPMs at no pounds of boost, or whatever, a theoretical unimaginable pounds of boost number, because we haven't even calculated that yet. So what we do know is that we were running 33 pounds of boost. So how do we go in and fix our math so our math adds up to our dyno thing? Well, we know that our conditions that we ran on the dyno on are not great. We're also running the compressor at a pressure ratio above what it's meant for, and drawing more through it than what it was originally designed to do. So we can go in and we can correct the compressor efficiency. Instead of 74%, we can use 68%. So 3.24 times 0.68. Next, it's hot outside and we're not driving. We have no airspeed other than what the fan is drawing through the core. And first, it has to draw through the radiator and then through the intercooler. So if we change it from a 45% gain in intercooling to a 25% gain in intercooling, which seems fairly realistic given it was extremely hot and humid, and we did not have a fan. We do have a fan that we can put on the nose, but for the most part, all the testing we've done is 3 runs. We check oil temp, make sure it's good. Strapping a big fan out on there and running cords out to it is quite the task, and then putting it all away. So instead of a 45% gain, the intercooler's hotter. There's not as much air blowing across it, so we don't gain 45%, we're instead gaining 25%. If we use that, we get 2.75. So 228.5 CFM, 33 pounds of boost, 33, we would take the 3.24 times 0.68 times 1.25 gives us 2.75. 2.75 times 228.5 gives us 628.57 CFM. After doing all this math, that actually adds up to what we're doing. And that's 44 pounds a minute. If we actually go check what the compressor is designed to flow, this number might be a little higher, but realistically, then we have to go into brake specific and all that fun stuff. 44 pounds a minute on a 55 mil, you're nearing its max. They're realistically about a 50 pound minute compressor. If we gated it tighter, if we kept the gate closed, I should say, we just run the gate on spring. So the boost actuator or boost reference was unhooked and with just spring pressure. If we would put a bolt on the back of the adapter plate and lock the wastegate down, definitely would have seen more boost pressure and probably eked out the rest of the compressor flow. But 44 is nearing the max for a 55. This feels sound for what we're seeing here based on our humidity, outside temperature that we're running on, and no fan across the intercooler, just using engine fan. So that's about it for that run. And these are our baselines. This is on a stock HX35, 55, 60, 12 with no boost reference to the wastegate, just running on a wastegate spring, 33 pounds of boost. Took it all the way to 3,000 RPMs. There's not really a good reason to do all the way 3,000. We could have stopped at 2750 and we still would have netted the same peak horsepower at 2,500. You can see torque's falling pretty fast at that point. So we'll also have a part in this video about why we should test for boost leaks and why we create our own boost leaks, on top of boots themselves rubbing and intercoolers starting to come away from end tanks and the tubes cracking and all that fun stuff. So in this case, I created the boost leak. We got good footage of what it sounds like, and we'll get that in there. So we're coming to the conclusion of our first stock turbocharger dyno video to get a baseline for all the turbos we're going to test hereafter. I'd like to thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment down below. This is kind of a fun video. This is a truly stock turbo pushed as realistically hard as I'd like to push one. We have a lot of fuel at the pump. We have a huge restriction at the injector. Kind of fun to actually see what happens when we kind of restrict fuel at the injector and then just have the pump. We have the attitude adjuster to control the maximum rack travel available, which we saw in one of the runs we can do. We talked about torque curves, how far out to run the truck. Once you kind of get the first run in, you get an idea of where peak horsepower is going to be. So we got to work within this window. Also use some of the math that we've used in previous videos on how to read a dynagraph and understand what your turbocharger and engine is doing. We can pretty confidently say that we're consuming between 44 and 50 pounds a minute through the compressor wheel, and then burning the set amount of pounds-hour fuel to turn that into rear wheel work, or work on the piston, on the crank, through the trans to the rear tire. So, on the next one, we're probably gonna get a S300 on there. So that's gonna be fun. Can't wait to do that. So thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye.